Welcome to today's episode of the People Strategy Forum, where we delve into the secrets of building workplaces that not only function, but flourish. So, joining us today is Jason Yarusi. He is a titan in creating dynamic and thriving business environments. As a seasoned fund manager with over 300 million in commercial real estate and a builder of community-focused cultures, Jason has mastered the art of empowering people to reach their full potential. Through his leadership at Yarusi Holdings, which has acquired thousands of apartment units, Jason has cultivated a Live 100 culture, and we're going to talk about what that means. But he's been pushing for peak performance by nurturing empowerment and inspiration among his people. So, beyond real estate, his diverse entrepreneurial background spans from construction to hospitality. Each venture is guided by his commitment to excellence and team growth. So, whether it's running ultra marathons or hosting multifamily live podcasts, that's his podcast, Jason embodies the principles of living fully and leading passionately. So get ready to be inspired by his insights on transforming your workplace into a launch pad for exceptional achievements. Welcome, Jason.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So, I would just, as we kind of kick things off here, one of the things that I'd love to learn more about is just you as a person. I mean, I know that you have a lot of stories to tell, but can you tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today and the success in both life and in work?
Well, I grew up as a shy kid, right? So I was very shy, just wasn't really outgoing. And so, didn't have a lot of confidence built into things. And, left high school after, facing some challenges, had some friends that passed away just from some tragic events, some close friends, and I felt a little bit lost. And I went to college, got a business degree, and found that I didn't want to have anything to do with anything of finance or business. And so I moved into New York City instead of just, taking the logical approach that most of all my friends were, from going in, finding a job somewhere in finance or engineering or something of that management position. I moved in and started working in bars and restaurants, and I spent a number of years doing that, to the point that it was just my life, and I was just doing chaotic things and getting chaotic results. And a couple of years in, just found that everything I was doing, I hated. I wasn't happy with, right? And it cultivated and just crafted my results, both financially to personally, right? I wasn't in great relationships, and lo and behold, one night I was leaving a bar at 2:33 in the morning, got on my bike to ride across Manhattan, and got hit by a car.
Wow.
And next thing I know, I'm in the hospital, a couple broken bones, some stitches, pin goes in my wrist, and I'm leaving the hospital. And the only thing I could think about was like, man, I need to find a way to get back to this job because I need to make money for rent. And I had this pause where I just said to myself, well, that's a pretty crazy thought. Here we are. We're just out of the hospital, and all I can think about is getting back to this job that I don't want anything to do with. So either I have to just say, okay, I'm okay with what I'm doing, and just go on and stop complaining, right? Stop blaming everybody else, or just do something different. But the thing was, I didn't know what to do different, right? Many times we get stuck and we're just saying, I got to do something different, but we don't know what to do. So we just keep doing the same thing, expecting different results. So lo and behold, I just started to try something that was different from what I was doing. Stop, drinking at night, stop staying out late, get up in the morning, go work out continually, go do things that were just different. And they weren't massive changes, but consistently just doing them day in and day out, it started to create energy that was going away from the negative into a positive direction. And that just started to really compound, where I went from, working behind the bar to opening up a bar and restaurant, open and sold a brewery, before now finding another path of moving into the construction world. And so I went out after Hurricane Sandy hit the East Coast to help my dad with a family construction business that really was always a small business. And we grew that to a good state to get my dad retired, and a few years after that, before finding my way into real estate. And so 2011, 12, started to move into the direction of real estate. We started to flip homes, buy some Airbnbs, do wholesaling, a bunch of things. But when things really started to take off is when I stopped doing all of these things, right? We were having good success, but we weren't really doing great because we were just doing too many things. And I came upon buying apartment communities. And that really stuck to me because I just understand the model of just being able to buy a large asset and being able to use the economies of scale you get built in with just even a large business, right? And we started to treat it like that. So 2016 into 2017, we started buying apartment communities. And so the first one we brought was a 94 unit. And then over the course of the next, we'll say 8, 9 years, we've now brought a little over 3,000, I think 3,003 or 400 units down here, mainly in the Southeast. And that brings us to where we stand today. I've moved from the East Coast. I'm down here just south of Nashville in Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
So what does it take to run all those different locations? I mean, what's the size of your staff?
So there's internal and external staff,
Mhm.
right? So I have the internal staff that's 7 people, right? And they handle on many facets a lot of the part from investor relations to admin to just marketing to anything from we have an in-house property management team that manages about 450 of the units to everything from leasing to construction management to asset management. So we have that on my side, but then we have the external team, right? And that comes down to all of my property managers that handle these properties in different parts, that have the on-site leasing staff, the maintenance staff, any of the back end office staff they had. So we have two different formats that go. So our internal team, we have about half of them here that are in Tennessee, and the other half somewhere actually up in New Jersey. And so they help manage the assets from there. And so when we first started this in 2017, 2016, it was just my wife and myself, right? And
Mm.
so we found that it was great. We were like, okay, cool. We did it with that. And the second one we did, and then the third one. And then it quickly became apparent that if we wanted to progress in this, we were the ones stopping the growth, right? Because if there's 7 roles to do, if we're working on talking with brokers or underwriting deals, then we weren't, being able to really service investors. We weren't able to work with the property managers, right? So there was always a piece missing because there wasn't enough focus on just building a team for support. So as soon as we started to put people in positions around us, it was able to allow us to go and flourish in the roles that we really should be doing for our business, that cultivating new opportunities, and then also investors, right? And so when we did that and got the energy back into that, then the business really started to take off in the next following years from there.
Yeah, it takes a lot of. Oh, go ahead, Howard.
Well, I was going to say, how do you overcome that initial fear? Like everyone's always afraid of, oh, I can't do this because I have to pay my rent. I got to put food on the table. I have to provide for my family. So it seemed like, how'd you overcome all those hurdles?
When you do this, and I was actually talking about this the other day, is like when we put all these things as like this max extremist, right? It was like, and that's what many times is like we think everything is like the 1% like worst case scenario, and then we have to get credence that there's also the opportunity that the 1% best scenario can happen. Because most of the times we'll say, well, if I do this, well then the property might burn down, and then all of a sudden now the collector are going to come after me, and then I'm going to lose my house, and they're going to come take my dog, and you're like, whoa, just what happened? All you're thinking about is just trying to do something better than where you are today. So you have to put things into silos, right? So even when I was explaining this to my wife, and we're a good pair because I'll look at the future, but then she'll ask me, do we need to do this, right? Like, and so give me cause to have reservation, just make sure to go through it. So I started to look at this because I had a small restaurant and a big restaurant, right? And I found with the small restaurant versus the big restaurant, I had the same thing, right? The same taxes, the same insurance, the same electricity, right? But I only had 12 or 13 seats, where the big restaurant had hundreds, right? And so when you look at that, I had the same things happen. I had to pay for it. I had to pay for the rent, I had to pay for the part, but I had more opportunity to go out there and create revenue on the bigger property because it could sustain more, right? So with the apartment buildings, if I had a 4 unit, right, I couldn't hire a property management company. That means I had to run the whole thing. If I had two units vacant, I was at 50% occupied. So I might not even cover my expenses, my mortgage, right? If I did certain things, it wasn't going to make that much difference, right? If I went to push the rent up $50, it was only $200 a month. Well, if I have a 100-unit building and I have 5 vacant units, I'm still 95% occupied. I have one roof. Now potentially, if it has to be replaced, can still be sustained as part of the operations. I could hire a whole team to operate the building. So I started to break it down into a logical approach to look at it and say why this makes sense. Because many times we think bigger is more scary or more risky, but many times bigger can provide more opportunity for you to go out there and create a business model. Because when we do small, it's like, you're putting your toe in the water, and maybe you can work out the process, but you're constrained by your limitations of the property, right? So you have to look at both sides and say, okay, where's my temperament? Because many times when we work with people, they ask, well, what unit size should I start with? And it really comes down to their mental capacity at the time, right? If you want to do a 20 unit, we can build a plan to get there. If you want to do a 100 unit, fantastic, we can do a unit to get there. If you want to do a 6 unit, No problem. That's where we need to start. But you don't need to do a 6 unit to do a 100 unit. It's like, hey, I want to go, swim. So I need to, ride a bike, learn how to ride a bike first. It's not translatable. It's like where you need to do one. It's just where do you set your stage and where do you go out there? And so to get over that fear, it just started to ask myself, okay, I don't like where I am.
Yeah.
And to make that change to get where I want to go, it's going to take something different from what I'm doing. Because if I just keep saying I want things to change each and every day, that's what I had done for years. I was just saying, I want things to change, but then I'm doing the same thing, right? It's like, okay, well, nothing's changed. Well, you're doing the same thing. So why should something change? And we get so comfortable not liking where we are, but it's safer than us stretching to potentially do something else, that we just stay in this place that's comfortable, even though we dislike it to extremes.
Right, but was there a catalyst to that kind of inspired you to do that change to ramp up to, and then also to focus to reduce risk?
You look at, there's always catalysts. It's just that time of you choosing to actually act on it, right? So
Yeah.
what I think was a big part is that with all the different things we're doing in real estate, we just, if there was 25 hours in a day, 8 days a week, we could have used them because we were just running rampant.
Yeah.
I think my wife was pregnant with our first child at a certain point, and we just had no time. And it was time induced where we were the ones causing the activity, but more activity wasn't necessarily getting more results, because with many parts of real estate, it's very transactional, right? And so if we win and flip the house, it's not like, okay, it's all good, just can't do anything else. You got to go do the next project. And you do that next project. And so you create this hamster wheel you're constantly on until you can say, okay, what's the direction we go from here? Do we just continue to ramp up this business, which we started to do at a certain point? Well, more activity just created the need for more activity. So when I started looking at apartment communities, what made the logical sense is that it started to get my time back where I could focus on things that could scale a business, right? And pull myself out of the part of activity, right? I'm not here, on the ground talking with contractors, run the Home Depot, just trying to work with just getting things leased. Now I can put together a plan where other people would service it. So it was just that strain and pressure on me wanting to break the mold of just being chaotic in my day, right?
Yeah.
Because the days are chaotic enough without me adding to it.
So tell us about Live 100. I mean, how did that come up? What does it mean? What is it?
Sure. So Live 100 is breaking your bad habits so you can build momentum, so you can magnify the success you deserve to have. So the three foundational blocks are break, build, and magnify. And each of those three blocks have core principles on top of them. And what really stood out is that a lot of people have come up to me over the years and said, well, how'd you break this change? Like, how'd you get out from, being at this one part, from being a bartender and just making these things? And I look back and it just got to the simple part is that I started to be self-aware of how I was showing up. And that's the first principle, right? So I'm self-aware that I wasn't showing up in a good way. I was negative. I wasn't forthcoming. I didn't, have a good head on my shoulders. I wasn't responding in a positive way. I would just, my thoughts were always from the lack and not of the long, right? And so I had to be self-aware of how I was showing up. And the next part of that was, instead of just saying, okay, I guess that's what it is, I started to own it. I said, okay, I'm not showing up in this way, right? So I'm not showing up as the person I want to be. And what that stood out is that I knew I wanted to be someone different. I wanted someone that could, control my day, be healthy, have success. And then I started to look at the habits of what that person would have, right? How does that person show up? Well, they weren't constantly saying, well, how's your day? Well, at least I'm not dead, right? It was that I started to get away from those things that you would just hear, right? And you start to pay attention. Like, people are like, well, how you doing? Oh, like, it gets that part, because when you start putting those words out into the universe, like, your mind can't tell the difference, right? Whatever you're feeding your mind, it just starts to create your energy going out there. And so I started to be self-aware, but own it, right? Okay, oh yeah, I'm not showing up as that person. So how does that person show up? And so the third principle, is you have self-awareness, you have owning where you are, is positioning yourself for greatness. So you start to look at the person you want to become. And you don't know exactly how that person is, but you have ideas, right? You see what this person is, right? They're confident. They stand up straight. They speak in the affirmative, right? They have beliefs that are positive beliefs. They talk with positive nature, right? And you start to say, what is the gap from where I am to where that person is? And it starts to make you aware, right? So your mind starts to open up, because 98% of our day is just handled in a subconscious way, right? 2% we're actually conscious to it. Like, I was like, when you first go to drive a car, you get into the car and you're aware of like, here's the steering wheel, like how do I put the car from park into reverse, right? Where's the pedal? Where's the brake? Like, but now you get in the car and you just go and drive it, right? Well, that's a lot with our habits, is that you either have good or bad habits. And you're either just constantly saying, okay, this is a good or bad habit. Most of the time, we're built on a lot of bad habits that just happen routinely throughout our day. And we don't even pay attention to them. Instead, we start being self-aware of those habits. And then we start positioning those habits to be better habits. And the key is that, especially here with New Year's resolutions, is that people want to break all these habits, but you can't just break the habit and just say, okay, it's broken. There's going to be a white space there that now needs to be filled. Right. So if you were, if you're a smoker and you smoke, 8 times a day and it's 15 minutes within that day, right, there's 2 hours now that are opened up. And if you're not conscious about what now serves in that 2 hours, you're just going to fill with another one. You're just going to go in there. Okay, well, I'm not smoking. Well, I'm chewing nicotine gum over there. You're doing something now that just replaces that moment because you're not really truly thinking of that time you've gotten back and what's going to serve it. And so the best way when you're now limiting or trailing back or trying to break a habit is finding what is now going to replace that habit in a positive way, because it allows that time to now be filled with something that's going to help you in both ways. One is going to make you a better person because the habit's a better builder, but it's also going to allow that habit is being replaced to just consistently stay replaced.
And so, I mean, so finding ways to cut out bad habits and replace that with investing in yourself in some ways. So, but what,
It may be investing in yourself, but it also may be stopping to pull yourself down. So
yeah,
sometimes it doesn't always have to be energy. And I need to invest myself and I break it. I don't need to go smoke and now I'm going to go and, run a marathon or read a book. It just, you can eliminate something that's really pulling you down and detracting from the rest of the positivity you're doing.
mhm,
And many times it's like, like eating healthy would be one thing, right? Like if you're not eating healthy, do we say that you cut out every single thing you do and you make it so hard on yourself and you go to this part? No, you can live your life. But if you start going from 0% of healthy eating to now you're at 70%, like think about how your day changes, right? Think about
yeah,
how your mood changes. Think about how your energy changes. So you can have big changes in a small amount that allows you to sustain, right? Like I talk a lot about just consistent habits that are built and repeated, where not every day you win, but you start winning more than a lot.
mhm,
That changes the whole dynamic of your outlook. And usually when we do a New Year's resolution, we go from not working out all year to like the first week in the gym where we're 3 hours working out and you're like, I'm so sore. And then you never go
mhm,
back because you've made this transition that there's no foundation for. And
right,
so the build part of it is that you need to build really habits and rituals that can serve you, but then intentionally execute. Right. And so what would be better? Trying to find 3 hours to work out, where maybe you can do that one time a week, or doing 15-minute workouts, 5 days a week. I would say 15-minute workouts is going to build you into a better person over the long run, because you're going to build a consistent habit you're going to repeat, and it's going to make you a healthier person than trying to find this 3-hour workout that you constantly have to look for that may not ever fit into your day.
mhm. So I know that when people are listening in, they're going, well, yeah, that sounds. I mean, it sounds great. I mean, it all makes sense. And then I'm thinking, I was like, okay, well, drive, drive, drive. What do we? How do we think about this with our leisure time, and how do we recharge?
So again, leisure time gets back to this part of just do you use your time as leisure, or do you use your time constantly scrolling, right? Because
Mhm,
there's for social media, we all use it to a way that it builds us, and we can use it a way for fun too. But you can't just use it to this mode of just a constant filler, because we've taken out this time from like. I like to run. When I go out and run, I'm not out there scrolling social media or like listening to things. Or many times I'll just go out there and run, because what happens is it opens my mind to just not have this distraction filler, right? And this
yeah,
distraction filler stops me from being creative or having ideas. And so I get out there, and what happens? A lot of the things that are on my mind get solved, because now I've had my mind a moment of pause that frees it up. And
mhm,
so do you have to cut back and just say, okay, I'm not going to watch TV ever again? No, but if you can take it and say, okay, I usually watch TV for an hour. What if you watch it for 50 minutes and you just take 10 minutes before and just have this time where you go write down your day or write down your moments, right? And you start putting these parts. What's going to happen is that you're going to start getting creativity back in your mind. You're going to start to solve a lot of problems that usually just get washed away because what you're doing is just filling time. Like,
yeah,
you think about I was trying to explain to my kids, we went to Europe the other week, and, on planes, I did this like 20 years ago, 10 years ago. You just be on a plane, and it's like, you're just flying somewhere. There's not like TVs everywhere and all this stuff. Now you have, bells, whistles, you got, things, you got so many times, like you're fully engulfed in just so much noise at all
Yeah.
points, right? Where you just have no time to yourself. And
Right.
many of us, we live from the second that we wake up to the second we go to sleep with our phone in our hands. And that's part of the life of the business that's available, but that's not all that life has to go. And if your job is very, very, it's very draining and very, very, it needs you a lot, and you constantly have to be on your phone. One of the things that I've done that's worked is that, I go to a jujitsu class twice a week, and it's an hour right in the middle of the day, where I usually come out and, anywhere between like 60 to 100 calls, texts, and emails, just because it's right in the middle of the day. But what I find is that, if I didn't go to that, right, I'd be in the motion of in the thing, let's solve the problem, where usually you empower people, because most of that, say 60% of that, is solved by the time I get to it, because they've now gone to find a solution. And
Yeah.
so with your team, you can either be a task giver, right, where you're just constantly giving the answer, or you get better team by going and saying, okay, listen, like I brought you in for this role, right? So, and here's our goals, like here's our shining light, like here's our lighthouse, here's where we want to be, right? What would you suggest we do in this moment? And what that does is it allows them to take control back and start to empower themselves in the moment, right? To be able to go and make decisions. And you can now then go say, okay, if you give them these three options, those are great options, right? Let's do this option. Or if they're on a great path, go run with it. And what's helped us grow is that, we have the idea of how we want this to roll. But again, I've brought you in to run this role. So give me your ideas of how we can make this better. And then we'll go craft it together. Instead of me just saying, hey, listen, Howard, I need you to go out there and lease this property, go put it on these three marketing channels. And when they come in there, do this and this and this. And we may be stopped because you're just doing exactly what I told you to, even though there's a better way, right? Or even though you see it as a different options to grow, but that's what you've told me. So you're just staying in your lane. And that's allowed us to grow as a company, because the employees, they feel part of it, and then they feel empowered to go out there and make progress.
So have you adopted the Live 100 philosophy with your employees?
We have worked in a lot of capacity to continue to break it, because again, we've started to on a process where we buy the same apartment buildings all the time, right? So we try to find the same type of assets and do that model. And so what that does is it creates consistency in our business plan, but there's always room to expand, right? And so we look at it constantly with our process of just the apartment communities, and then the property management side of saying, these are the steps we're taking. How can we constantly refine these steps? Right. And then that allows us to build and build and build, because you go into those peaks, but then you plateau, right? And when you're plateauing, you're saying, okay, because we're doing the same model, but now the model needs to, be changed, right? Because we talked a little bit offline that the market's always changing, right?
Yeah.
You see pressures, there's times when everybody's doing really great and everybody's got money, there's all these things, or they're getting stimulus money, where now you've seen the last year, 2 years, where there's been a ton of inflation, everything costs more, gas is more, groceries are more, rent's more. So people are having harder times, right? Or different marketing channels. So you have to look at ways that we can continually go and look at our business and look at the things and the habits that we're doing, and the execution that's happening as part of those habits, and how that needs to be adapted, so we can continue to build, so we can continue to magnify the growth that we have.
So, but being on that Live 100 program that you've adopted for yourself, I mean, it has you show up differently as a leader, more healthy, and so forth. And do you? How does that? How has that impacted your culture at your organization?
I've gone away from the directional to the empowered
Hmm.
role, right? And that made a big difference. I think years ago, I had more angst and more anger. A lot of that was just built on prior things, where I've gone to the part that everything is not level 10. Like we're not always operating at like RPM 8,000.
Yeah.
And many of us in our lives and in just the day-to-day action, we treat everything as if it's its own same fire, where 98% of the time they're not fires. And what I look at is that I call them 5-year problems, right? If I'm going to remember this in 5 years, that it needs my full attention right now.
Yeah.
But 98% of our day are things that I'm not going to remember in 5 years. So they just need to be handled in the appropriate manner. And when you get back to that, then you can work with the team and say, okay, here's the problem at hand, right? This can either something that waits or something we need to find a better way. But what it usually does is it puts us in a position to just create better practices for the future. So when things come up, you look at it and you say, okay, that was not what we wanted to happen. And before, it may have been something that, very upset about it for a part, but now I look, okay, great. Let's not have it happen again. So how can we make our processes better? And that's helped us overall, because now the team can say, okay, we're going to make this better, right? We're not going to allow this to happen again. But the next time we see this, we'll be able to just handle it in a way that'll be quicker, cleaner, and more appropriate for the time.
Mhm. So your leadership style is really helping people be accountable and autonomous in their daily jobs and so forth. And I imagine that takes really clear communication and framing out priorities and so forth. So is there a way? I mean, you mentioned about setting up priorities and so forth. Do you help your people on a certain cadence to kind of understand their priorities?
So we do basically 2 days of meetings. It's a Monday meeting and a Thursday meeting. And we don't want to meet to death, but we want to meet and hit on the things that are most valuable to our business, right? So the Monday meeting is a meeting that's on the organization.
Mhm.
So we come in there, we handle open items, we handle anything that's on urgent or needs to explore, but it gets the week off on the right foot. And on Thursday, we meet with the team, and internal and external, on each property. And what that does, it allows us to go in and focus on the property. So we'll focus on the property. It'll be leasing, will be operations, will be anything that's construction related, then will be open items. And when we do that, it allows each person to come in there that is usually operating in a silo, or maybe operating in a silo for a week, to get in there to make sure everybody is on the same part for the same team. And what that gets us out of is just the chaos of everybody trying to communicate on all levels throughout the week. And so we start Monday with the right focus. We go into Thursday looking at where we stand on each of the properties. That allows us to refocus to get us back to Monday. And we found that those are 2 good linchpin days for us to just address the open items that really need to be handled with the properties and with the team.
So, what about just you were talking about balance and then avoiding burnout, and that's part of making sure that people are autonomous and accountable. So, what is you? I mean, I know that you've established this for yourself, but for the people in your employee, are they practicing some of these same habits?
What I look at is that when you talk with the team, is that we always want things now, right? So we want to be in shape now, we want to have money now, but what we want to do is we want to have this forever too, right? And so we want to find the things that we do in our day that are enjoyable, that we want to continue to do, into 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, right? And so working with the team and working with others, it's about building a process and building a life that we can continue to do, right? So why do you work out now? Well, it's so when I'm in my 50s, 60s, 70s, I can still be working out, but I can also have time for my kids, my grandkids, and just feel healthy and still live a life, right? Where many, they do things because they're up to a point, right? They're sick or in a hospital, they have some diagnosis, and now they have to because they're forced to it, right? And so a lot of this is that there's a point to do it, but there's also not a rush to do it, because you're going to be doing this for a long time. So you have to find things in your life, and whether it's working out, whether it's reading, or whether it's having time with your kids, that you're fully engaged for the moment, but then you now use this as a stepping stone to get to the next moment and the next moment. Where we use these New Year's resolutions thing to go out there to try to do something in the immediate, but it doesn't stick because we haven't built into the foundation of what that's going to present, right? So I can't. There's such a disconnect to where I am to where I want to be, that I don't have the foundation for it to sustain. And so with the team, it's constantly working with them, is that, I want them to make as much money as they can. Like that's the big focus, right? I don't want my team here to be struggling and to be lacking, because that's not what this whole thing was built on. So we're constantly looking to empower them, and then empower the people we work to go out there and make the best life they can, right? Because why are you here doing all this if it's not for something that's going to make you better as a person, both for yourself and for the others around you?
It also requires building a level of trust, right,
Oh,
between you
absolutely.
and all the folks. And
Absolutely. When you think about trust, is that, you know, there's many times where you work with employees, and part of empowering them is that they feel a level of trust, because you're not just saying, hey, do this, hey, do this, hey, do this, where they don't really know why they're doing it, right? But they also don't feel like you trust them, because you're not allowing them to actually do the role they've been brought into.
so what happens when inevitably someone screws up? I mean, it
Yeah.
happens. How do you handle those types of situations?
I just human nature, right?
Yeah.
We're all sinners. We're all making mistakes, right? We're all doing things, right? So that happens, right? And you get back to the root cause. Okay, how did this mistake happen?
Mhm.
And then the goal is to say, okay, this has happened. What is the ramifications, right? So let's deal with that, but then also let's correct the process going forward. And many times, when I think in my past, I would have just, would have been like, whoa, you did this. But usually it's that point of a lot of the things that happen, it starts from the top, right? There's some practice or some principle where it happened because I didn't create something from an organizational standpoint or just a team standpoint for this to be handled accordingly. So it was not handled accordingly. And you look at that and say, okay, well, it comes back to me, right? This is my company. I'm given a part. I've put them in these roles where it gets down to it. Okay, is this the right thing that I have set up? How does it need to be changed? How does it need to correct it? Right? What needs to be changed with just, employee manual or just company, just overall company operations. And when you look at that, it's not so much of a blame. It's saying, okay, this has happened, right? Let's course correct. And then the part would be if it happens repeatedly, then we have to say, okay, is it the wrong person in the wrong seat?
Right.
And then we make that adjustment.
And sometimes people do need guidance, right? So there's a balance between full autonomous and then giving people the right amount of guidance. And so, is there ways that you develop your people? I mean, do you have certain programs in place as far as development?
We look at the roles and so we bring someone on for a role, but then we'll develop them into the role and we'll
Mhm.
build out the role both in the person, right? Because our company's expanded with the people that we have here, but I'm not scared to also look at them and how they've developed in the role and what we develop and to say, you're actually in the wrong role, but there's another role that's grown here that we need to move you into. So we have two people on our team that started in one role and then we moved into another role because as we've developed, with them and worked for them, it's definitely stood out that they would be better positioned in different roles, right? And so when we
Mhm.
work with our team, we don't want to just stick with it and say, well, I hired you for this, or you're staying here, right? We want to say, okay, what's going to be the best position for them, but also for the company, right? And so it's constantly looking at the team and making sure we're addressing where they stand so we can all continue to just rise together.
Yeah. I want to kind of back things up a bit. I mean, because I know that you're a serial entrepreneur. You've had restaurants, you've been in construction, you have this real estate, business that you're doing now, and this empire. Among developing all those businesses, what types of learnings do you have as far as for other leaders that are building a business around the people element? Hiring right, making sure that you're motivating people, retaining your top performers.
So, I mean, there's many levels we can go on there, right? But you have to have at least your lighthouse to start because sometimes
Mm.
we open up the business, but we don't know what the business is going to serve, right? Or who it's going to serve or who the customer is going to be. And we're just kind of guessing out there. You have to have a lighthouse because what that allows you to do is when you start the business, like you can read as much as you want, listen as much as you want, but you're going to learn the most by taking the actions. And what the actions allow you to do is that it allows you to just get feedback in real time to understand, am I absolutely in the wrong direction and I need to stop and change? Or am I kind of going somewhere in the right direction? I need to pivot, or am I in the right direction? And now I can go, basically put fuel in the fire. So when you think about that as part of that process, you have to look at it like, do I need to bring people on? Who is that first person I need to bring on? And when you're hiring, you can hire in a way of just saying who's the best candidate, but you can also hire on energy too, right? Some of our
Right.
best people will come on is that they just have great energy, a great person, and you're just going to figure it out, right? And so that's the person we need on our team. And then we find people that are fully capable, but then they don't have the mental capacity yet, or they're just lacking in their own mind, and they can't serve the role because they're just in doubt at the moment. So when
Mhm.
you look at the team, some of the early hires are the most important because if you say you go from 5 people to 100 people, right, they're going to be based on the principles and just the operations of those first 5 people. And so I've constantly looked at our business to say, okay, what's going to be that driving goal we want, and what are some of the first people we need to get there?
Yeah. And then a lot of times, I mean, you mentioned that you're looking for those people that are innately engaged, that really want to perform, that they'll figure it out no matter what, and on your team, which is great. But I also find that some of those individuals that are high powered like that can burn themselves out. And so, how do you help your team prevent burnout in those situations?
Yeah, so we've kept the work hours what we find is reasonable. We give them shorter times on Fridays, right? Where it's here, get the work done, but then after hours, things may come up, but we're not constantly in a mode of just hammering you after hours. Many
Mhm.
times, just like anything, like everything can always be a fire or it can just be part of operations. And when you get burnout is when everything just seems to be a fire, right?
Yeah.
Oh, a tenant called and a doorknob's loose and it's 10 at night. It's like that doesn't need to be handled tonight, team. Like, like
Mhm.
we'll work on it in the morning and put in proper procedures, right? And just get back to procedures of okay, did they put it into the platform? Did they put in a maintenance request and then allow that to go through channels? So just allowing the team to just understand the dynamic of just there's certain urgencies that we need from you each and every day, but then there's not everything that's an emergency. And then it
Yeah.
allows them to focus on it because it's just like to-do lists. Like if you give the team 100 things to do on a to-do list, they're going to feel constantly busy and they're probably going to focus on the easiest things to do. But if you say, okay, as part of this to-do list, there's only really 3 things that matter here today. So that's where I need your focus. It allows them to put that energy into it. So then we're getting the most appropriate things done for the time.
Mhm. Okay. So, kind of coming full circle back to just leadership in their personal development. I know that there's a lot of things that you've done in your program. First of all, if somebody wants to learn more about the Live 100 and what it means and how they can find more information on that, I mean, what would their first step be?
Sure. So 2 things. We have the Live 100 podcast. You can find that on all the
Mhm.
podcast platforms or YouTube. It's very short hits. We're talking 6 to 8 minutes. We talk a lot on the core principles of Live 100 and just a lot about our journey. Or you can go to jasonyarusi.com. There's a free assessment there they can take and just basically it answers questions for themselves just so they can get their starting line of where they're at today.
Mhm. Okay. And so I mean I know that this another business line that you have that you're also running and helping entrepreneurs do better with
Correct.
their lives?
Yeah, we do peak performance coaching for a number of
Yeah.
people. A lot of them are real estate driven, but a lot of them are business owners as well, right? And,
Hmm.
and they're having some level of success, but it's not exactly where they want to be. And then we help them craft a plan to just break out from their mold of where they stand.
Great. And how long have you been doing the podcast and the individual coaching?
So we have the Multifamily Live podcast and
Mhm.
then the Live 100 podcast. The Multifamily Live podcast, 2016, I believe. So
Yeah.
we've been out there, and then the Live 100 podcast about a year and a half, maybe a year and a half.
Hmm.
And we've done a lot of coaching, both on the real estate side and performance side. Last couple of years, it's been maybe 3-4 years now.
Yeah, well, I got to say, I've been looking at a lot of your content in the Instagram and social media, and it's really inspirational. Like a great balance of life and in business, because I think that's one thing a lot of leaders kind of lose their eye on. I mean, I know Howard and I come from a long line of large or Fortune 5 experience, and
Boy,
there you just in 20
no,
years
I'm away.
ago. Yeah, 20 years ago, there was, it's like, well, you're not supposed to have a personal life. It's just,
Mhm.
you go into business, you do your thing. And so but one thing that I really love about the new leadership is that we understand that there's a connection. It's just kind of like the mind body type thing. I mean, there's a work and life harmony that needs to happen for people to do their best work. And I think that you definitely demonstrate that in your program and what you're providing online. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So as we wrap up here, what are the top things that you would like leaders to walk away from this discussion?
So you actually touched on it. I think a big thing was that today, which even speaks to that, is that there's more ways for us to connect at all times, right? So you can be constantly on, right, like all the time. Where the thing that's worked very well for me and partition others is that be focused on where you are. Many times, we're at home and we're with our family and we're not really there, right? So the time is not well spent, right? We're with our kids for a couple hours and we're overthinking about his work, and then we get to work and we feel bad that we weren't with our kids. So now neither are being beneficial because we're not at either place at either time. So
Yeah.
when you're one place, just where your feet are, just put your mind down and put it into it and put your time into it, because it's going to allow that experience to be better, but you're going to be so much more productive in the other space when you're actually there. That'd be number one. Number two is that your to-do list, we all have them, But usually if you look at your to-do list, right, there's 3 or 5 things on it that actually have to happen. So do them first, very easy. And then usually that other 30 or 40 things, either find the people that should be doing it or just get them off your list, because most of the time they shouldn't even be on the list, and all you're doing is just making a longer and longer list each day. And you're doing them like, oh, today,
Right.
you know, I need to, you know, call that one client who's thinking about not re-upping with us, but I'm going to go get stamps. And you're like, you know, like, and you're like, okay, so like, what, you know, like, but that's like a lot of our focus. Like you put off the things that inevitably need to happen that have the most focus on the growth of your business.
Yeah, good point there. I know I catch myself doing that all the time. It's just like, just don't, I don't want to pick up the phone again today. It's like, but I have that mantra. My mantra for this year is an extra 2%.
I like it.
So that's
Yeah.
it. Yeah. So I'm trying to think about that as I go along, and to keep it going, and just because, you know, just those little bits every day. You know, I know that you're a very fit individual there, Jason. Talking about jujitsu and so forth. But the one thing that I found most impactful this past 2 years is just a regular routine. You know, you do a little bit each day. It doesn't have to be painful. You know, it just needs to be that little bits consistent, pushing the needle every day, and then it just magnifies.
Oh, 1,000%. You said 2%. I don't know the compounding number for that, but 1% every day for a year over the course. People are like, that's not that. You get 1% better every day. People are like, that's not that much. It's 38% or 3,800% of improvement, right? And so you look
Yeah.
at that, just how big of a change that is, and it's everything, right? And
Yeah.
so I like to set off my mornings by just having control in my morning, because the rest of the day is going to have chaos in it, whether you want it or not. But it allows you to be at least present when that, and focus on that, and not feel like your whole day starts in chaos. So get up, you know, just have consistency in my morning, allows the rest of it, when it's inconsistent, for me now to be ready for it.
Yeah, you know, there's a funny story. My wife was just sharing this social media post with our kids, because, you know, sometimes, you know, you get up in the morning, you walk into the room, and their bed is just like a shambles, right? It's like there a bomb hit in there or something. And you know, and there's this she shared this military guy in social media about, you know, making sure that your bed is tight, you know, because that's the first thing. And the first thing you do, and that's on your to-do list, if you make that bed and make it nice and pretty, then you can check that one thing off of on, you know, in the morning. And then, you know, no matter how your day is, it can be the worst day ever, and you come back into your room, and there's that first thing that you did right there in front of you,
Yeah, I love
that
it.
made bed, you know.
Yeah, starting with a win is a very important thing in life.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, it's been a wonderful conversation, Jason. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise, and giving it back to the community here. Thank you.
Thank you both. It's been great to be here.
Take care.
All right, take care, everyone, and we'll see you next week on the People Strategy Forum.
Bye.